Right, let's go back to the big story of today, which is Jeremy Hunt, Chancellor of the Exchequer, standing behind a podium with Labour branding, saying Labour tax rises, and telling everybody that, well, to Labour, tax rises are as sure as night follows day. Well, let's speak to Angela Knight about that, who's an ex-Treasury Minister and now CEO of Energy UK. Good morning. How are you doing, Angela?
Hi, I'm fine. I have to put my hand up. I haven't actually seen the picture you're talking about.
Well, no, I'll explain it to you. Quite remarkable. Yeah. Normally, you've got the Conservatives went through a phase where they really enjoyed their sort of three-word mottos, didn't they?
That's right.
With their sort of big Tory branding. Well, there he is standing behind a white podium, a white backdrop, and in red font, sort of the old school, I'd say Tony Blair-era Labour Party font. It just says Labour tax rises instead. And I thought that's a bit weird.
It's not a good idea.
No.
Well, it's not a good idea anyway. Don't stand in front of your opposition's banner or your opposition's name before you even start. Yeah. Only stand in front of your own and your own colours and your own name.
Yeah, I mean,
so,
right.
Yeah,
what voters want to hear is positivity. Yeah. We want to know what the Conservative Party are going to do. And in an era of AI and fake news, it's pretty odd, I think, to sort of stand in front of the opposition's branding. Very weird.
And I do think that actually lots of people, of which I am one, I have to say I am one, have got fed up with the, in one respect, superficial bat and bat back that's taking place, and an absence of each party to really get into an honest discussion with what they can and they cannot do, what they are going to offer and what they're not going to offer. So let's hear from the politicians themselves properly, not in a soundbite, but properly about their policies and what it is that they're offering to the public. And I think that could go down quite well, frankly.
Do you know, Angela, you have come to the right place for honest discussion. I'm glad you're here, because let's have that honest discussion, because it seems to me that... the Tory party have always dined out on the fact that we're the ones who protect the economy. We're the party of growth. We're the party of low taxes. And everyone's looking at the reality and saying, well, that's clearly not true. Then when you listen to what the Labour Party have to offer, it's much of a muchness. And anybody, it seems to me, who wants to propose something slightly more radical, I mean, Liz Truss, as balmy as people might think she is, did try and do that and soon found the markets thought, well, that's not going to work, love. There's not enough money in the kitty to be proposing such radical tax cuts right now. But it seems to me that both parties have become a sort of faint version of the other one. And is that down to the fact that there is a limited amount that can be done in the Gordian knot of global markets? Is it down to the Bank of England being in charge of things like interest rates? Is it down to the Office of Budget Responsibility signing off on whatever the government wants to put in their fiscal events, as Charlie Rowley would call them? Why is it that the parties seem to be so straitjacketed that they can't do things like move tax bands, that they can't stop paying interest on when the left hand loans to the right hand?
Well, there's two things in. Let's take the first thing of what parties, and indeed what a Conservative Party has done and what it can do. First of all, you can't have a pandemic in which people are paid to stay at home for their own health and the protection of others, and borrow money to do that and not have to pay it back. So there is therefore one huge amount of debt, and a country, just like individuals, has to pay that debt back at some time. And if you've got to pay it back, it means that you have to tax people. And so the reality of where we are now is that any political party who is in charge of the economy here in the UK still has the same consequences of the pandemic to deal with, and that limits, A, what you can do, what you can spend money on, and B, it also puts, there is this awful debate about tax. Can you reduce taxes? And the answer at the moment is probably no. You can do a few bits around the side, or you can pick up a bit more here or there. But the mainstream of taxation, which comes from income tax, national insurance, VAT, and then you've got a chunk from corporation tax, you can't really twitch at all, because there's a huge pressure on public services, a huge pressure to spend, and we borrowed a huge amount of money to get the country through the difficult times. And that's reality number one. There's no bottomless pit. There's no somehow if you just pick on a group of people, call them the rich, that they can go and pay for something else. And actually the Labour Party knows that as well. The Liberal Party does too, but the Liberal Party isn't considered a serious player, and therefore it doesn't have to cost its pledges. So and can I just say, as an economy and as a recovering economy, we're actually doing pretty well. At any spot moment in time, you can do analysis of the UK and you can either say we're growing faster than X or we're growing slower than, G something or other. But if you look at the trend, you do go up and down a bit with trend. If you look at the trend, the UK can do better, yes, but it's actually not doing too badly. And we've got a lot of people in work, and incomes in many instances have more or less now caught back up, and growth is not exactly good, but at least it's kicked off. And having one son who lives in Spain and a load of friends in both Germany and France, I appreciate that those who are listening to this program aren't living in those countries, but, there are some significant better preferences of living here because we've done it sensibly. And what's more, we haven't got extreme parties biting around the edges, which is happening in European countries right now and will come forward, no doubt, into fruition in the European elections, which we don't participate in, but are going to take place in June. So now if I shift, if I can,
yes,
to
why does I'm finding you fascinating.
Sorry, why does the Labour Party look sort of like almost a shadow of the Conservative Party? Well, yes, it is part of that economic straitjacket, and they've got some realists in there, so they know that if you promise too much right now, then people say, well, why aren't you doing it? And the answer is you can't. So, they've limited their promise. But the main thing is this, is that there's a long-held political phrase which says oppositions don't win elections, governments lose them.
Right.
And do you know that is pretty right? So if you are in opposition, you want to minimize the number of areas that you can be shot at. So what you do is you pull in your horns and you don't go radical, because if you do, then you'll get shot at. And of course, you're waiting for the government of the day to lose that election. And all your, people who are on the various wings, because our political parties form their coalitions before they go to the polls. We call it a broad church, that's fine. So all the various wings, they can see the opportunity of gaining power. So when that happens, they just shut up. And so that's why the Labour Party has become a party that really doesn't say much, doesn't have a programme, and has a mantra which says, well, if we were in power, we'd have either done it earlier or we'd have done it later, or would have been nice about it.
Something that I think you could sort of look at as clean air between the two, perhaps.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad you're here to talk about this with the CEO of Energy UK. I find it quite staggering, actually. The Labour Party are pushing the idea of sort of old Labour viewpoints, really, of renationalising things or bringing things back under state control. Yeah. One of them, of course, is renationalising the railways. The other is setting up Great British Energy, and certainly looking at what's going on with water companies, a different utility, of course. People are very unhappy with what's going on in the private sector there. Again, I find it quite entertaining because the process of renationalising things and bringing them back under state control is pretty much the work of Brexit. It's very hard to do as a member of the EU. But is that going to cost an arm and a leg? Is that a policy that when it gets towards the general election, Labour are going to have to conveniently disappear along with the Edstone?
Yes, they will have to constrain what they say about it, because if you are going to renationalise anything, you've got to buy out the people who own it. And in the instance, whether it's water, whether it's energy or whatever, those tend to be the big pension funds and the big investment funds. And interestingly, it's one of the big Canadian pension funds, which is the major owner in Thames Water.
And they're leaving, aren't they?
Absolutely. If I was in Devon today, I'd be absolutely furious. And I'd be furious because, the water is not pure as it should be. People are getting ill. We weren't told about it early enough. Doesn't look like there's much compensation, and they haven't seemed to sort it out. I'd be furious. If you took water back into the public sector, first of all, you've got to pay out billions to do that in the first instance, i.e. you're going to increase your debt. Now, some people would say, oh, yes, we've got an asset. Yes, you have got an asset there, but you've now got to use taxpayers' money to do all the jobs of pipes and sewage and new reservoirs and the rest of that long, long program. And that's not going to happen because you're going to say, well, I'll cobble along with the old infrastructure and put the money in the hospitals. And that was the reason for privatising in the first instance, was to get off the taxpayer the investment in everything. So you had a system that worked in the private sector for the benefit of the public. Now, and I'll just come back to that phrase in a moment. And then that which had to be provided by the state was provided by the state. Now, if I come back to my phrase that I've just used earlier for the benefit of the public, I do not think that the regulation of the water industry or indeed of the energy industry has been good regulation at all. It has focused in both instances far too much on keeping the price down. Now, you can keep the price down, but if you keep the price down, you can't invest. And with the water industry, first of all, the regulator caps, that's limits, both their operating expenditure and their capital expenditure. So they are, in fact, an economic regulator.
Right.
The structure of the water industry has been allowed to get out of control. But if you want to say, why have they not done X, Y, Z? The answer is, I'm afraid the regulator has not done a good job. On energy, it's slightly different. There on energy, unfortunately, people have told porkies for years. They've said that if you have green energy, if you wind, for example, it's going to be cheap. Not telling people that every time the wind doesn't blow, you've got to have a backup.
Yeah.
So you've got to have your gas or your nuclear as well as your wind, i.e. you sort of double the amount of capacity in order to give you renewables. And the grid's got to be altered as well. So the investment that needs to go in is huge. Up to now, a lot of this has sat on your energy bill. Yeah. In fact, many people's energy bill, about half their energy bill has nothing to do with the gas and electricity. It's everything to do with all those additional costs. So if I said, which feels like half an hour ago, because I've been going on a long time, I apologise for that.
I'm transfixed. Angela for Prime Minister.
But I said a long time ago in this interview that what the political parties need to do is explain it. Yeah. We are not fools. And of course, what is happening is there's hope that it'll all be, cobbled together, another patch here, another patch there. You can't do that. Energy is one of the huge issues of the time, as is social care.
You will be greatly missed if you were no longer CEO of Energy UK, but you're greatly missed no longer being a Treasury Minister as well. Please think about coming back into politics, because you tell it like it is. There's a woman who clearly knows her onions. Angela Knight, ladies and gentlemen. Isn't she amazing? I think she's utterly extraordinary. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Well,